Yay, we're live. Okay, let me just wait for a few people to hop on. Hello, everybody. Hello. Sorry, let's sort out our IT stuff first. Mic check. I hope everyone can hear me. I hope everyone can see me. Welcome to another live conversation with myself, Karabo. It's always an honor to host you guys in having these conversations about parenting and the issues that are close to some of our hearts. And today is our first insert to a live series on fatherhood. So just looking at the landscape of fatherhood, and I am super excited to be hosting my guest today. So before I just hop into that, just a sec, let me do this. So before I invite my guest to join us, so the conversation I'm having today with Pam is really one part of a fatherhood project I'm working on today with a beautiful blogging sister of mine, Sibs, and we'll talk about her further in other episodes. So this month for us is really just about honoring fathers for the amazing superheroes that they are when they are really present in our lives and doing all they can, right? So we're honoring that, and we are also pushing the conversation of understanding the complexities of fatherhood, because I would assume for a lot of people it's quite a complex journey, and I'm also talking in relation to my own partner. So that's also conversations that will happen. So this is one part of 3 episodes that are going to take place where we talk about fatherhood, and then the other conversations that we're going to have is with actual fathers, father friends of mine, just to understand how the journey has been for them. And then we're also going to have a conversations with mothers about their understanding of fatherhood and how they creating the environment for the men in their lives to be as active as possible in the lives of their children. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Pam, who is the program manager of Heartlines Fathers Matter campaign. Hello, Pam.
Hi, Karabo.
How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm good. I'm
Happy
also
Friday.
excited. Happy Friday. I'll drink to that. I'm drinking that.
This is my road boss.
Oh, yeah.
So we're definitely into that. I'm super excited to have you. Thank you so much for honoring us with your time. And really looking forward to the conversation, to getting comments and questions from whoever's listening. We would really like to engage you as well in the conversation, just to understand the landscape, not only from the perspective of Karabo or Pam, but to get it from yours as well. So Pam, let's I always like, let's just jump right into it. Right? So I would really like to firstly, as a starting point of the conversation, just chat a little more about Heartlines, the Fathers Matter campaign, and your role in the whole program and what it means to you.
Awesome. Thank you for the opportunity to have me. I'm really good to be here. And it's such a necessary conversation. And I love what you said about the complexities of fatherhood. It is, part of our research title is fatherhood it's complicated, and it really is complicated. It's not so linear. And I guess today we'll just get to some of the aspects of it that are complex. But Heartlines basically creates research-based mass media initiatives or projects, if I may call it that. So our work is rooted in research, and we use that research to inform a process. So the process being an intervention that we do. So we focus on a very social issues. So we look at a social issue and then look at what the literature is saying around that social issue, and then do our own research on the issue to inform a creative process. So we're a media organization in that we create films, resources that speak to that particular social issue. So fatherhood is a journey we've been on as an organization for about 3 years. We've been literally looking at the literature that's out there. So when we started, it was just to do a literature review of what the experts out there are saying about the topic. There's a growing, what do I call it? It is a growing field, I guess, in South Africa, that more and more people are interested in the topic, and more people are doing research around the topic, which is very exciting. And I'm sure you'll be aware of, there's a report that comes out called the State of South Africa's Fathers Report. So just one of the it's growing. They've got a new one coming out next year where they look at various issues around fatherhood. But we then did, we spent a year doing our formative research. So this was 2019. We basically went and spoke to fathers because we want to understand what are the barriers. So we know it's complex. We know that it's not that fathers aren't always interested in participating, actually. It's very complicated, like we said. So we wanted to understand what are the attitudes, the driving attitudes, what is driving the behavior. And then we are now in 2020 started developing the program and the intervention. So my role, I'm a project manager there, so I'm the project lead. I'm everywhere, you name it. As long as it concerns matter, I am there. If it's in copy, if it's talking to a Karabo, if it's working with the research team, going to focus groups, my role, it's my baby, basically. I was a baby, but I do the day-to-day care of it.
Okay, that's awesome. So how have you guys it's been a long journey. That's amazing to know, because it means there's a lot of work that actually went into it to create the report that you guys have had. So how have you guys taken the formative research and kind of brought it home in terms of what you guys have been doing after doing the conducting the research and posting the results? How's that journey been?
So because the topic is so broad and we're just one organization, we won't be able to tackle the topic in its entirety. So we had to take our research, take our findings, and actually narrow it down to about 8 key messages. So we've got 8 key messages. Whenever we speak to Fathers Matter, everything that we do, every resource we'll produce, every film that we'll produce, it will speak to those 8 themes. And those are the 8 themes we've decided that we want to focus specifically on. So one of our key findings, for example, our biggest finding was that money is the biggest barrier to participation. And it's also confirmed by other researchers as well. But for us, it was money is the entry point to fatherhood in South Africa. So when you talk about money, when you talk about provision, so society tells men that you're providers. Women expect men to provide. Children expect their fathers to provide for them. And a lot of participants often said that when my father provides for me, he loves me. Provision and love were almost the same thing. However, we live in a country where our unemployment rates are so high. You know what I mean? And I mean, just looking at COVID right now and a lot of retrenchments and a lot of fathers possibly who are out of job. What does that mean for a father who wants to provide, that is unable to provide, therefore is not given access or is seen as not fulfilling the role? So if you're not fulfilling your role in my life, what is your purpose in my life? Just wherever you are until you can come back and provide. So that was one of our big findings. But anyway, you were asking me around those 8 key messages are informing a process for us. So we're in the stage where we've got 6 scripts, 6 half films that we are actually working with 6 script writers, developing that. So by December, those will be done. And once again, they touch on the 8 themes of provision, of women often playing the gatekeeper role, actually, was one of our findings, of the importance of the first 1,000 days. And I'm sure you're very familiar with that, of gender norms, of barriers, because men are often seen as you need to be, not emotionally engaged, not culture is a barrier. So we looked at those 8 themes, and basically our films will speak to those 8 themes. We're looking at resources that we're creating to empower men, empower organizations working with men. We're also inviting women to the conversation as well. So we've got times coming up, but it's a long process for us. With 2021 only going into production for the 6 films, for instance. Yeah.
Wow, exciting! It sounds like some exciting projects they will definitely be looking at. So let's speak to one of your findings, right? So you said vision is how people, I'm not going to say men, it's not how men just specifically look or define fatherhood, but human beings in general, if money and it's funny because I think it's definitely the thing, because I remember asking my partner the one time, like, what does it mean to be a dad? And for him, he said, to be able to provide for my family. Already a complex issue of fatherhood is made even more complex about just in relation to all these things, other things we are applying to it. So in some of the research you guys have found, what other cultural dynamics are playing a part just in terms of the finances? Or maybe firstly, let's speak to the definition of fatherhood. Let's rather use that as our starting point. What do you find was the consensus in terms of how people you were having a conversation with were defining the term father?
Father is a provider. Father is a provider. Therefore, I mean, what we seek to do as a campaign is to expand that definition. That fatherhood is more than provision. A father is there more than just to financially provide. We are not saying provision is not important. Provision is important. So we're not just saying, no, as long as you're not providing, no. We are saying provision is important, but there is so much more. To you as a father, you have such a huge role to play in a child's life, in their development, in their development and who they be in the future, by just playing more than a provision role. So I don't know if you know Takalani Sesame. Takalani Sesame is just launched research as well around male caregivers and play. And what they wanted to understand is, what are the barriers to play? Why are men with their children? So a lot of men said, I provide, therefore play is not, something I would prioritize. So time, obviously it was time, but provision as well. So we see provision come through in so many, many ways, in how, and our participants often said, a father, when you say what is a father, predominantly it was a father.
And I think that's so wild, because I would think there's so many other facets to provision than just finance, and providing house and food, like providing emotional support.
Exactly, psychological support, playing, provision is so much more, and there are many other ways in which a father can contribute. But I also just wanna, maybe before we get into the nitty-gritty, is in South Africa, we need to be careful when we use terms like an absent father. and a present father, we need to unpack those a little bit more, because people can tend to use the term absent father very loosely. So we know that almost 70% of children live in a household without their biological father. That does not mean that men are not participating. It just means that they are not within the same household. And in South Africa, the nuclear family is no longer the norm. So we need to be very cognizant of that, because it plays a role. So we cannot determine whether a father is present or absent by their residency. Residency means nothing. Participation, engagement is everything. And that is why we are not pushing, no, you need to be living in the same household and therefore pushing fatherhood. We say, even if you're not involved, even if things have ended between you and your partner, even if you live in different provinces, engagement is key. And there are many creative ways in which you can stay engaged with your child, but we are driving engagement rather than residence. Because a father can be present in the home and be very absent, and not very engaged with their child. So we cannot just say, no, that father is present in that household. No, is that father engaged? Is that father participating in their child and not just merely existing?
I think that's so profound, because I've been watching a lot of fatherhood content recently, and I saw a comment from someone saying, "I lived with my father my whole life, but I still have the father wound."
Exactly,
and I think to that so much.
And that can be as equally hurtful and destroying to someone and than people who have never met their father. So it's got both.
So the engagement element of being a dad is actually key to providing, because like sometimes, yes, money is important, but sometimes our kids don't always need the money. Like I notice now, like I beat myself so much about, I couldn't afford to buy that toy, and next thing she's just playing around with his cup and having her best life. And it's like, it's not raising a child is not only about money. And I think that's the conversation where we need to but then I think that gets more complicated, time, because in African culture, if you impregnated a woman out of wedlock, then boy, you are expected to pay what is called in English damages.
Very loosely translated, yes.
Yes, but it's always better in Zulu.
Inhlawulo, yes.
So how much does that then just act as a barrier over and above a guy who's like really scared that he's about to be a father? And now it's like, actually, if you don't have money, then you really can't get your way like beyond that.
It is a huge barrier. It is a huge barrier, and the work and just being on this journey of fatherhood. We've met a lot of men who say, I want to be present. I want to be there. I'm unemployed. I am unable to bring what is required of me to the family. And so, families then tend to, because that hasn't taken place, therefore, a father cannot participate. So that a culture can act as a barrier. So ours is not to challenge, it's not to say culture is good or bad. Ours is just raise the level of dialogue and debate. And I mean, we need to get there as South Africans and start talking about those things. We talk about, attachment in the first 1,000 days. Imagine that father who's impregnated a girl, and for a period of time, for 4 years, unable to interact in that child's life because they were unable to pay inhlawulo. They have missed out on the most critical years of that child's life. They missed out on creating a bond and an attachment to that child because they are unable to come up with the funds. So that's where you see provision once again, playing into the cultural space, where Yeah.
Before a child is even born. Before a child is even born.
Before a child is even born. And yeah. And I mean, one of our webinars, we're talking about this in our webinar series. And, you know, we're just throwing out there, are some of the cultural practices such as inhlawulo, how do we go about it? Like, how do we have a positive conversation around it? How do we practice and balance culture and participation? Because we know that in the end, that child benefits more with having a positive male. And in South Africa as well, when we're talking about fatherhood, Karabo, I'm still on this topic of culture, is we talk about, especially for the Heartlines campaign, we talk about biological fathers, but we also talk about social fathers.
Yes. The
And those abo malume, mkulu, cousins, teachers. So we are blended families, exactly. And for us, we're saying if I mean, I was raised by a single mother, you know, and I think I turned out okay. I mean, I still have my own issues I'm dealing with not being raised with my father present, but they have such a critical role to play in being in children's lives as well. So we cannot remove. So you know, there's benefits of that in South Africa. The extended family is you know is just what we do. So culture, what we do as South Africans, positive, and some of it maybe not aiding conversation, but we do need to have a conversation as South Africans on how we go about it. Yeah.
I would like to be a part of those conversations. My heart broke the one time I was visiting my sister. She stays in the complex in Fleurhof, and I saw a guy outside the gate, the other complex, with the girlfriend, and the girlfriend was like showing him the baby, and I asked my sister, I was like, what's happening there? It's like, the guy didn't pay inhlawulo, so he's not even allowed to step into the gate. I was like, I even wrote a piece about it that young men are seeing their children through fences because they just happen to live in a country where the unemployment rate is like one of the worst in the world, right? Like, even our unemployment rate is really ridiculous. That's where they can't accept it because they can't afford to. It really did break my heart. And I'm all about talking about how just how do we also redefine our cultural practices to kind of settle in with the right now, because our reality right now versus what it used to be when our mothers were falling pregnant outside of wedlock, it's not the reality we are in right now. Like, we're in a completely different landscape where it's find a job and everything is so expensive also, you know.
But Karabo, as we talk about inhlawulo, there's something in the African culture called tsoetsi, right? Where you've just given birth. You go to your mother's house, especially if it's your first child, right? And you stay there for 3 months.
Yes.
So now, and then you must come back into a house with your partner, and suddenly your partner now needs to figure that you guys are already in a rhythm, you know, and now he must just and then can you imagine how isolating? And I'm sure there's reasons why these things were created. You know, there was the support that a young mother needed to show her how to do this. But we're saying actually a father being involved in those, you know, in those early days, he builds, you know, he gets to create that attachment. So we need to talk about these various cultural things that are happening. I mean, I was so excited the other day that Vodacom has introduced a gender neutral parental leave policy. Now that's progressive, right? Because that then means, why are men only getting 10 days?
For sure.
Oh,
there's a big
months.
narrative. There's a big narrative that the 3 days was promoting that he actually does not need to be around.
Do you
You can just
understand?
mommy and take care of the kids. He
So,
doesn't need to.
so structurally, I mean, policy-wise and society-wise, we
Yeah,
just created so many barriers for ourselves sometimes, in how
yeah,
men don't participate.
yeah, yeah. Like
Because,
another one that's been sitting very closely to my heart, and I've been trying to work on this for so long. I pray that it also comes together. The whole
yeah.
bathroom scenario where a dad will come along with the child who needs the bathroom. It's like, where must he change the diaper? Right? And they're like,
People,
no,
moms and thoughts.
yeah, wait a king. But in there's certain malls that have family rooms, and I'm like, no,
Mm.
that's in the north, darling. We are saying that is like a privilege for people
Yeah.
in the north. Everyone
We,
else,
yeah.
like,
We're saying a
yeah,
dad, must change your
yeah.
nappy ko butunya koloi. That's what we're saying. In the boot of the car, that is
No,
where
we shouldn't
you
even be changing. We like if the narrative says the dads don't change nappies entirely.
basically,
That's
basically.
what the narrative says. So a dad who actually wants to, he must then figure out himself how to do it.
I mean, a
Yeah.
simple thing. I mean, at ECD level,
Mm,
I've got 2 children, and
mm,
some notes come back home, and it's, Mom, can you?
mm.
When the teacher and the school is well aware that that child doesn't come from a single parent household, bringing fathers into the conversation.
Walking the dads in.
The father. How about when there's a parents meeting? You're actually saying, "Can I see the mother and the father of this child?" It's
Yes.
irrelevant whether you guys are together or not.
Yes.
But we need at ECD level, at the mall, at our clinics.
Yeah.
I mean, there's only a certain um, group in society that is able to go to Park Lane or Mo Park, but a majority of people are accessing government institutions for
Yeah.
health. Are our healthcare systems geared towards
Supporting.
fathers being involved?
Mm,
One of our webinars, again, we had a guy present, Zohab,
mm,
on talk about the child grant, that there's
mm.
2% of men that are accessing the child grant in South Africa.
2%.
2%. And one, so those men are primary caregivers. So once
Okay.
again, our communication, you know what I mean? Even in
Sure.
our communication, even in the SESA offices, those men in his research often felt they're the weird ones. SESA
Mm.
offices with women coming to collect the grant.
I'm not
And
supposed to be here.
yeah, what are you doing here? You should be out there fending. But there is support from the government that's been given. So, I mean, even in the communicating that, just
Mm,
from a perspective, just elevating that communication that if you're a man and you're the primary caregiver of a child, you actually have access to
mm.
grant like a mother
Yes.
would. So,
Yes.
from a policy level, we've got apparently one of the most advanced, when our policies are very advanced, um, but it's implementation that often fails us. It's the pictures you choose to put on the wall. It's the posters you put on the wall at a SASSA office, at a clinic. That
Yeah.
can be very isolating. You
Small
know,
stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So
And I think that's so tragic because then that informs how men also view their role as father. I was looking at the report you guys had, and there was one dad who said, I couldn't even carry my baby on my back without even women looking at me like,
yes, yes.
"Pepina Kwana," like, what are you doing? Like, it's their child, they have a back, they better carry them.
How about we start normalizing that? How about we start, and what you were saying about we don't wanna sing for fish that are swimming. So we don't want to basically just say,
Yeah.
fish, you're doing great, but we normalize. I mean, I can just imagine a man just pushing his child in a unillicit trolley. I haven't done one of those in a long time. In a thing,
The solar, yes.
in a stroller, in the stroller. Um, a lot of women as well, just like, oh my word, you're doing so well, you're doing so great. My boss often talks about when his wife is away, his
Yeah.
mother, like his cousins will call and be like,
Are
"Can
you
we sing?
okay?
Are you okay with the kids? Should we come?" You know what I mean? Like the
What
men,
goes on?
that's babysitting culture of no, I was babysitting my child. We are not babysitting. We are parenting, fathering. It's called fatherhood.
Yes.
So not babysitting. And no, even Rona, when we see a man doing what he's actually supposed to do, we need to normalize that. We need to normalize fathers doing drop-offs, fathers being changing nappies, fathers
Yeah.
normalize that. So we
Yeah.
still have a long way to go, but we'll get there. There's hope.
Yeah, I think we're making some progress because I think there's more and more conversations happening around the idea of patriarchy and the idea
Exactly.
of the mother's role versus the father's role. And because there's so much, man. I mean, now when I came back from the hospital, my mother-in-law was with us because now both my
Mhm.
parents were late, so she had to come in and have a really good relationship with her. But she couldn't stay for too long. I think she stayed for a week or less, and then after she left, it was like, okay, Dad, let's do
Dude,
this.
you and I have such similar stories. It's so awkward. Hey?
Really? I was like,
Very,
oh.
yeah,
And the first
very.
night sleeping with us, he's like, what is this?
Yeah.
But what I've also learned is that a lot of the times guys actually want to come to the party, right? But they just don't know how to do that. And I think that's
Exactly.
been my role, to not sit and have expectations about what he should be doing or shouldn't be doing, but instead
Mhm.
communicating that, right? To say, hey, I'm breastfeeding. Can you help out with this and that? Because then when I don't do that, he sits there and then I get like really frustrated. Oh, look at him just sleeping and snoring away. Where I
Exactly.
to say,
Hey,
oh,
those breastfeeding days, man. When you are so exhausted, you just don't know what's happening. I would say, like, you don't.
no, it's Monday, kapag Friday.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
last you choose the top you're wearing?
Hey,
Did you
hey,
eat this morning? Like, everything
no.
is such a
It's
blur.
such a blur. It's such a blur.
But then I've always been curious. I don't know if you guys have found out through your research about what men go through when a child is born, right? Because for us it's such a trip, man. Like you immediately just fall in love and your maternal instinct kicks in. But do they have some inherent fear about this role that they stepping into, like in relation
Mhm.
to how they reacted when they found out that the child is pregnant? Because that's always like an experience with guys. Like it's like somehow they just shut down. I remember my husband was like, he went blank for a while and then didn't sleep the whole night.
And I mean, yeah. I mean,
So
part of that, Karabo, is um, perhaps a lot of us have not been fathered as well. And you suddenly are, you've got a responsibility for another life. Being with your partner, it's cool, man. They can look after themselves, they can feed
yeah,
themselves, they're a whole adult. And suddenly being responsible for this young soul that has your DNA. It's not just someone you picked off, JK. This is you.
I always say that. I'm like, it's a whole human being that is entirely dependent on you. You can't leave them there like a person and say, "Oosh, I'm coming back." You know?
No, this is not your niece or your nephew that you visit and say hi, and once the the nappy stinks, you give away. No,
Yeah.
this is yours. So I mean, I'm not a man, and I don't want to speak on behalf of men, but for me, in this journey, and I've heard so many things around fatherhood, I can imagine how scary, because from a young age, it's almost like women are raised to be nurturers, right? Those societal norms, once again, when we talk about norms, gender norms, it's like, Karabo, you are left with your siblings. You must just know. You must don't read.
Yes.
We are socialized into being nurturers, right? So, and men and boys aren't. So don't cry. Be emotionally. You don't get to participate in the household. You don't get to clean. You don't. Things get brought to you. You get served. Your entire life is to serve. And then
Yes.
some become fathers, and we expect them to just miraculously. You know what I mean? And so for me,
Yes.
I mean, a long about way to get back to your question is it starts with how we're raising our boy children and our girl children, because that aids in that. Let's not blank out when
Yes.
moment arises, because as a young man you are taught to engage emotions, and nurture actually can be learned by both men and women. It's not a
I
thing. One of
could
our
agree.
findings, yeah, and one of our 8 key messages is that nurturing and caring and care work can be learned by both men and women. Men can learn to nurture, to love, to be soft, to be tender with children. Can be learned. So it's not something that is not there, but it's just a society we've allowed men to not participate in so many things. And suddenly we want them, so I can imagine it's a scary experience to suddenly now you are having to be responsible for somebody. But also, I mean, without knowing the actual statistics, I've watched a documentary that actually said physiologically something happens to a man when he is in that bonding phase. When, especially in the first 1,000 days, something physiologically happens to a man. Um, sorry, excuse me. In terms of building that attachment with a child. So fatherhood is good for men. That's the thing. We think it's good for women and children. It actually is good for men. It low. I mean, the HSRC has done work around this and Sonke Gender Justice, but actually, men have been recorded to limit their risky behaviors when they know there's a child coming in their way. Research, it changes men when men know that they're about to be responsible for something else. They change, but also physiologically, hormones are released and secreted when they're
Love
child. So they were always part of the equation. It's just we've done everything else.
They contributed to the human being, right?
Exactly. So can you just
We are great. Women are great, but no, not that great. We can't just create the humans. I love that so much because I could attest to that, right? And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine last week who was telling me, and she was like, "Yo, I've never seen my husband like operate at this level. Like his level of focus right now, because they just had a child. Like his level of focus and he's just like and my husband was the same. He started working so much harder and started thinking more long term, right?
Yeah.
Now every day he's just talking about wealth generation because it's like now it's not just about me. Now I have little humans that
we're building a legacy here.
we are building legacies now, So I really do agree. I'm gonna post an article in a couple of days about that experience, right? Because when my husband was when my husband was born. No, when my child was born, my husband was by my side, where he's always been. God bless him.
Wow, that is very precious. That
Yes.
we are blessed. Yeah.
So he was by my side, and he kept rubbing me. A tad uncomfortable. Like, I didn't want to be touched like that when I was giving birth, right? But I could understand that that was his way of being involved in the birth. So I just allowed it to happen just for the sake of that, rather than just having him as a spectator on the side. So he just
Yeah.
kept rubbing me. And when Utsimulua was born, when she just came out, he jumped a little bit, just a tad bit, right? He jumped a tad bit. And I have a video. He jumped a tad bit and like licked me a little bit. And I've always
Sure.
looked at it in retrospect to say, I wonder what was happening to him. And I asked him, and I was like, what happened? Why did you jump? And he said, no, I wasn't expecting the baby to look like that, right? I'm always looking at stuff in very different aspects, and I thought, what were you expecting? You know, like, like I don't think they go through a similar journey to us of watching birth videos and going on mommy groups to see what do I need to prepare, what do I need. Like, I'm proper hands-on from the beginning of the journey until the end. So low key, as a mother, I know what I'm expecting. But for him, it's like,
It was.
do they really sit online and watch birthing videos to say, okay, so this is what happens during labor? So that
Yeah.
shock for him probably wasn't just a physiological shock to say, oh, it's just a baby. Like some men, I said a video on the Citizen the one time about men experiencing childbirth, and some collapse. They are faintas, like, oh, shame. Shame.
Man, they need to be, I mean, from conception, we need to be, you need to be involving your partner throughout the journey, because we also have the physical experience. So you have the mental experience, but you also have the physical experience. You're feeling the movement. And I can only imagine trying to describe, it's like trying to describe pregnancy to somebody that has never been pregnant. It's so hard.
Yes.
Describing motherhood, it's there's just no words. You need to experience it to go, to
Very.
get it. Yeah, so sure.
So how do you think then, women in particular, since I'm on the women subjects, how do we create the barrier for men to participate actively? Let me just focus on that for now, because I've I've been so riled up in the past few days, with men sharing their stories about how they're going back and forth from court, trying to fight getting access to their
Yeah,
children, because they were in the
yeah,
relationship with the girl and they couldn't be
yeah.
kept now. And now they're like, no, I don't want you. I just want the child. And now to get back to that, the mom is like, okay, you don't want me. You're not getting the child either. That whole dynamic just breaks my heart so much. And I also think it's such a layered one, because then we then have to have conversations about, okay, Karabo, you don't want Chaba to access the child. How was Karabo's relationship with her father? Because then that probably informs their decision to say, you don't deserve access. So it's such a layered one. But to what
Yeah.
extent is that still happening, where men are just blocked and like,
Mm.
no, you're not going to see this child. You're a terrible person, when they actually, in actual fact, just trying to be as engaged as possible in the journey.
Whew. I mean, yeah, one of our messages is on, unfortunately, women as gatekeepers.
Mm.
It's a huge one. Women do play
Huge.
a huge role in whether a father participates or has access or not,
Mm.
children's lives, especially where the relationship, um, it has not worked out between the two partners.
Mm.
So the child is often caught in the middle of something
Yes.
that just not a part of.
Yeah.
Um, And I guess often people are hurt. And I mean, those are valid feelings that you someone and things didn't work out. And this child often, you know, you'd hear, hey, utswana le ntate wa hao, or you remind me so much of your father. I'm not in that situation, but I can imagine how painful it would be for, you know, someone who once loved someone and they now have a child together. And it's like bringing that person in is opening up a whole can of worms. So I'm just saying I acknowledge that. However, women have often played the role, the gatekeeper role. But I think if we all go to a point where we understand the the importance of fathers being involved in our children's lives, we can learn to work through some of the stuff. You know, it's going to be easy, but I think both parents to sit down and say, you know, listen, things might not have worked out, but there's a child here or there are children here that need you. You and I, we can, but yeah, so relationship between partners is a huge, huge one, and often linked to provision as well. Especially our participants, it was always Ibile West. When you are unemployed and unemployed, you will not see the
You're undeserving.
you like, what is your role in my life? We are not together. You can't provide for your child. So why are you in my child's life? But yeah, so that was a huge finding for us. And something that we'll be tackling with a series of films and resources on how do partners begin to work together? How do partners have the conversations that they need to have? You know, and for the sake of the child, like for the sake of the child. So not having a father in your life is not a death sentence. It's a risk factor, like smoking is a risk for cancer. You might get it, you might not get it. It just has such positive outcomes for the child, emotionally, socially, you know, the risky behaviors. I mean, teenage pregnancy, drug, and
Majority of our social ills are
man,
directly correlated to not having like I think about like sexual abuse,
everything,
gender violence, like it's
everything,
to do with the father.
everything,
Yeah.
and you know, it's so sad that we don't have a lot of large scale interventions happening in our country, especially in our country, around the topic of fatherhood, because we are very short sighted in addressing some of our social ills. Where literally, if we invested in our young children, if we invested and drove the message home that men, even if you're biological, even if you are a man who has his own children but sees another child in need of a role model, of a positive male role model, like you can affect a whole entire generation.
Yeah.
Some of the social ills we're seeing now, we could see them literally being minimized. I mean, in the US,
Yeah.
99% of children that were in juvenile, it could be traced back to just them coming from father, you know, households where there was no positive.
That's a mind-blowing statistic.
It's
92.
huge. They could literally trace it back to that, you know. And I mean, we have a relationship as Heartlines with correctional services. And I was just having this chat with them, you know, and I'm like, why are we not doing this kind of research in South Africa around this? Like when we look at the men incarcerated fathers, you know, we cannot also not talk about incarcerated fathers. So fatherhood intersects with so many things, basically.
Yeah.
It's not just something that we can look at in isolation. It's something that is central and very key in a lot
It's
of
such,
things.
it's such a cycle as well, because then what you tend to see, not only when it comes to fathers, only when it comes to mothers, right, is that
Yeah.
you find a Karabo who didn't grow up in the presence of her father, and then she becomes an insecure young girl, and then she becomes a mother, and then that wound creeps in, right? Where you are a Karabo that has a man that's really involved and really engaged, but then you want to mold him into
Yeah.
something he should have been for you, something your father should have been for you.
Oh, yeah.
So then it really just trickles into your adult life. And I love how you say you're very short-sighted about our social problems, because something that happened to you when you were 2 years old then comes up when you are 29, and you're like, how is this
I
how
thought I dealt.
what's what's
Yeah,
what's your personal story just in relation to that, if you can share with us in the audience?
sure. So it's very interesting for me that I'm doing this work because I have my own journey with my father. My father was never basically in the picture. I grew up without a father, had awesome extended family members. I've met awesome men in my life that have played that role. However, I was a very wounded girl. It's things that I'm still working through, you know. That father wound that you were talking about, it plays itself out in relationships. I look at my teenagehood, I look at my young adulthood, my self-esteem, my sense of self-worth, the things I was looking for in the partners that I dated, um, were essentially things that my father should have been affirming within me. I was looking for a sense of belonging, a sense of safety, a sense of protection that I never got. And so many years of my life, you know, I and then becoming a mother and watching my children in the presence of their father. And it's almost like I'm that little girl. It's that inner child in me that is, it's almost like I'm watching. So this is what it means I mean, it sounds so silly, but the concept of sitting on someone's lap, on a man's lap,
Mm.
it's brain cannot even fathom. Like, why am I sitting on your lap? And it's not Jay. You know what I mean? Like a simple thing, you know what I mean? Like just sitting on a lap is such a big deal for me. That for my daughter, when she sees her father, jumps, sits, she's here, Umo, like, and does not question
Yeah.
at all her sense of worth, because she's so affirmed and so loved. So I've seen that I've been working through my inner child stuff. Yo, Karabo. Especially, I mean, I'm 37
Mm.
and I'm just still dealing. So for me, this fatherhood, I've had my own fatherhood journey. I'm now working on this fatherhood project. I'm just like, yo, God, okay, this is it.
So God is saying, "Yay, Bereka,
Yay,
what to
let's
do?"
deal with your situation. And in my case, my father was not involved. And about a couple of weeks ago, we're doing a promo video for our
Yeah.
fatherhood. And, you know, I shared what I shared. And for the first time this Father's Day, for me, I was like, yo, you know, I've carried so much anger towards my father not being present, you know. I need to
Yeah.
release that. Because I've been doing my own internal work anyway. I was like, I need to release this man. It is not my responsibility to carry that. The fact that he was never around. It was he made, you know, he could have made a choice to not be, or whatever the context or circumstance was. Not my responsibility. I
Mm.
refuse to be a victim in this situation. And so it led to me reaching out to, you know, my half sisters whom I knew, but I could not even reach out to them because I had so much anger. And I reached out to them and they were so open and so loving. And literally the first day I meet them, they're like, let's go meet Papa. And I'm like,
Oh.
no, guys, you know, I just literally I said to them as a joke, "Correct. Guys, I don't want Msebenzi. I literally just wanna get to know you guys. I just wanna, if you guys are open to a relationship, you know, just want to love and get to know you guys.
Yes.
And literally, it went from coffee with them, which to me, when I woke up that morning 3 weeks ago, I was just going to have coffee with my two sisters, to suddenly meeting this man. I'd known him, I'd known my father, but he was never around. And just sitting in conversation and realizing that my father had a mental illness and was not even able to recognize me. And I prompted and prompted him and tried to remind him who I was. It was such, but you know, it was the most beautiful thing that could have ever happened to me. Because I've been on this journey of releasing and opening myself up, you know? And the girls were just like, please take a picture with him. And I look at that picture often and I'm like, I have a picture with my father. For people, you know what I mean? My daughter will never have to go through life and, oh, why don't I have a picture of my father? I literally take pictures of them every other day, literally. And suddenly at 37 years old, I have a picture with my father who doesn't even know who I am. And it was healing for me, you
Yeah.
know. I chose to release that pain before I even met him. Had
Sure.
I come into that situation full force. So all the years of being angry at someone, literally in one sentence, finding out that there was a mental condition here and the reason and some of the barriers to him probably having access to me would have been that. Then
Woo,
I'm like,
yeah, that is such an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah,
yeah.
like saying that you've been holding on to anger for a man who doesn't even remember who you are. Yeah, that
He
is.
doesn't know. It's because of the situation of his mental state, you know, he just could not remember. But
Yeah.
look at that picture, man. And, you know, just to sit in the presence of someone and say, yo, I've got my father's nose, guys. I've got my father's. And everyone's like, oh, you've got your father's nose. I'm like, yeah. But there was a sense of, you know what I mean? Just trying to find your
For
identity. It's
sure.
for young women, like people who struggle with fatherhood, like just growing up, you just like, and suddenly just even being able to look at someone and say, oh, maybe this is how I behave. Maybe, you know,
Yes.
I've got their eyes. Oh, wow, when I smile, actually, this and the other. It was such a healing time for me, much more. And in that moment, even though he couldn't comprehend half the things I had to say,
Yeah.
I said what I needed to say to him. He could, you know, and because I'm someone that's just like at a spiritual level, he felt it.
Yes. Oh yeah.
He felt it. And at some point, as we were just talking, things weren't coherent, but you know, he got emotional. And I was like, it was such
Mhm.
and I've learned, Karabo, as time goes, to not make my partner pay for
Your father's sins.
for the sins of my father, you know, to not make him,
Definitely sentence because I feel that.
because we need to heal. And I mean, I do a simple thing of I journal every morning, and where I've been able to, I've reached out to a coach or a therapist, you know. And I would encourage everybody here that there's organizations even such as FAMSA who are able, I know psychologists can be quite pricey, but the, you know, the organizations such as FAMSA as well, where, you know, therapy is discounted to seek
Mm,
heal, so
sure.
that you don't transfer all your junk onto your children, onto your partner,
Yeah.
um and control. No, but that's, I was such, yo, when I first had my daughter, was 5 now, skirts are so, where's the so, this and the other, and I realized that, hey, step back. This is not about you. This
It's
is
really
about
not.
him and the children. And I need to work through my stuff so that
Yes.
I don't transfer that to my daughter and make her feel some type of way because she's loving her dad, you know? So I would encourage anyone here, do the work. Speak to your inner child. It sounds airy-fairy, but trust me, I've been on this journey of talking to little Pam and saying, it's
It's
okay.
okay.
It's
Yes,
okay.
I love
It's okay.
that. Oh, I
Yeah.
love it. That's such a beautiful story. And just that journey happening to you while you're working on the program Fathers Matter. It's like, okay, God, okay, I see you.
Like I'm
Ah,
my own target market.
good one. Good
I
one.
am my own target market.
Imagine,
Yeah.
imagine. I think just to finish off, maybe another. Can I steal you for another 15 minutes?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Just to speak to that, right? And I don't think we discussed this prior, so this is gonna be like a bombshell for you. So I think in the Black African culture, fatherhood is so key because paternity is so key when you are a Black child.
Mhm.
I experienced this with my half sister, where both her parents were late and now things had to happen for her, and we understood how important it was, paternity. And then I saw it
Yeah.
when I was getting married, because then like there were a lot of complicated things that happened between my mother and my father, and like I said, both of them were late, so both of them were not here to speak on their behalf, to
Mm.
say, explain what must happen now, right?
Oh.
And it became so complicated because it's like, okay, lobola, no, we can't do it on the maternal side. No, it has to be done on the paternal side. Like, did you guys come across that in your research, or like, do you have like personal encounters of when your dad, whether or not they were present in your life, now have to like his contribution to your existence now has to come into fore to say now your dad is required.
Hmm. You know, we didn't go into it in a sense that it came up in a couple of focus groups. So I attended most of the focus groups.
Yeah.
So I think we know in African culture, the surname and African spirituality, um, people need to go to their paternal side um, and do what they need to do, amasigo or,
Yeah.
savings that needs to happen. So I think for me, it's such an interesting dynamic, right? When you throw culture in, as we were talking about inhlawulo, its relevance and
Yeah.
its relevance, and now the issue of, and for me, it's literally identity.
Mm.
It's people
Yeah.
looking for identity, and I guess our ancestors or people that came before us, there was something. I mean, we cannot then say fathers were not important in society or the role of was not important in society. I think for me, it speaks to children wanting a sense of identity. You could be as old as 50 years old, but yeah,
We've
the
we've we've watched those episodes of Utatako. We've seen
yes,
old men
yes,
coming and saying,
wounded,
I've
yes,
never met this man. Like, yo, my
yes,
heart broke. My heart broke so much when I watched an episode the one time from the
yeah,
47 years. I even had to write about it. When I feel
sure.
things at a very emotional level, I write them out and I
Mm,
share it with the world.
okay,
So
yeah,
I journal as well in the morning. So I
yes,
looked at how my heart broke so much when this guy went to Tatak. I think he was about 47 years old. And
okay,
he was like, nothing is coming together. Like he went to jail for one, for a very long time, because when he was at the stage of development where he needed identity and belonging, he found it in very wrong places because his father was not there. So his father couldn't, direct him towards the right.
yeah,
I think is
yeah,
actually profound when you look at the role of the father and the other stuff he can provide instead of money. So he's
mm,
47 years old. He's got a criminal record because he was in jail for such a long time. And he's got kids as well. I think he said he's got 3 kids or something. And he's like,
yeah,
nothing is coming together. I can't find work. Like I can't put money together. My children, one of my kids, I think, is sick. My kids are also struggling at school, and we can't deny. And I'm personally I'm a religious person, so I'm like a total Jesus girl, right? But I
Okay.
also cannot disregard who I am as a black person and disregard my entire spirituality. And
Mm-hmm.
he linked that to his ancestors. He was like, I don't know who I am. Because I don't know who I am because of the absence of my father, then I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what my kids are doing. I don't know what's happening, and it's important for me to find my father. And then and then he had a conversation with his mother, and my heart broke even more because he was just so smug about it. Like, help
Like,
me.
what's your problem?
Like, I'm here. Like, what do you need? Because then he grew up with another man he grew up with another man he thought was his dad, but just learned that it's actually not. And the man who raised him always suspected that he wasn't the dad. So he had a present father, but he wasn't engaged because he always let those doubts to say, when are you not mine? And he grew up so angry because this man always told him that you are not my child. So can you
Sure.
imagine the
Yeah.
wound that he
Yeah.
grew up with to say
Yeah.
every time I tried engaging with this man, he's like, And he had his other kids that he loved and adored, but him he always felt sidelined. So
That rejection.
that rejection, exactly.
Rejection. I
Rejection.
think, I think, Garabo, we are all just wired for connection. We just, whether you believe in whatever you believe in, like there's just universal things where human beings are wired for connection and belonging, and identity is critical.
Yes.
um, in the formation, I guess, as part of the development stages. And every time I watch Tutatako, I think what has struck me is people perhaps may think that a father is important maybe in the first few days or whatever, but a father is important throughout. You will have a 40-year-old who I just want
My
some.
dad.
I
Yeah.
just want my father.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just want to know who I am and whom I belong to. I'm also a complete Jesus girl, but even meeting my dad, one of the few things he could remember is his Tagazelo Sake, and I listened with such interest and I was intrigued, because I'm like, hmm, you
This,
know,
this is where
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
as strange and as small as that would have been, that is a sense of identity for me. And I just heard how they refer to each other as Botlo,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. Not that such things, but just sitting in that moment and hearing that was special for me. So I can imagine the role that identity plays in the whole, like, I'm not even imagining. I know for a fact that identity, and I've always joked with my husband and said, I'm one person that I don't feel a sense of surnames and names. It's not that deep. Uh,
Mm,
and when you dig deeper into that, it's really because that
yes.
identity was lacking. So in order to protect myself, I'll
Yes.
just
You have to. Yes.
I'll
Oh,
play it cool and be like, whether it's this, I've met people that feel very strongly about their surnames. Like, I will keep my surname, I will double barrel it. For me, it was neither here nor there because
Ahunataba.
Hakinataba, and that Hakinataba, when you dig deeper,
It came from somewhere.
and
Kitaba.
Kitaba,
Kitaba.
you just don't want to dig deeper. And there's that identity.
Yes.
Um, sense of identity that, I mean, when my kids visit their grandmother, they get called Mukoni. I mean,
Yes.
now they're young, but that gives someone a sense of identity that you are part
Yes.
of this collective, you're part of
Yes.
this
I
family, your
belong.
blood.
I
You
belong.
belong. You
Yes.
belong. Like there's a sense of belonging there. So
Yes.
cannot underestimate belonging, identity, and clearly that father figures and fathers tend to bring into the mix, into the dynamic. So
Yes. Oh, I love that. I think the key thing is that we really, as a society, as a people, we
mm,
need to redefine how we
mm,
define the father within the definition of provision, because there's so much
yeah.
out to provide.
There is
There's
so
the
much out there.
identity, there's belonging, there's the
Yeah.
love, there's the affirmations. There's so much more dads can provide that kids really, really yearn for, over and above just the money. So we need to redefine that for ourselves. And I'm hoping this conversation can definitely extend the dialogue, and kind of change the perspectives and narratives, in terms of how we also perpetuate
Oh
the
yeah.
the image of the father,
Oh
to
yeah.
when we side eye that guy who is in public, carrying the child on their back. That's me
Mm.
perpetuating it, because then I'm looking at him like, no, don't do that. And then he also feels out of place. So, oh, now se ke tsa ntho tsa basadi, I shouldn't be doing any of
Exactly.
that. So we really
Not
need to.
confident in their masculinity. That
Yes.
that like being emotionally engaged with your children, telling them you love them, and being affectionate with your
Yes.
children. Uh,
Yes.
talking, I was part of a group of men just the other day, and I was the only woman talking about fatherhood to a group of men. That was interesting. But
Yeah.
every men just don't know. They're like, where do I start? What do you mean engaged? How do
Mm.
I do this thing? And
Yeah.
it's something that should come naturally, right? But
Sure.
also estimating, we cannot talk about fatherhood and not talk about the history of this country, about
Yes.
destabilized families. It destabilized families. So there's a generation and generations of men that have grown up without fathers speaking and affirming their masculinity. And
Mm.
they are now the fathers, our partners.
Yeah. Yes. We are forcing them to do something they have no idea how to
They
do.
have no idea how to do. Just you would think for me it comes naturally. Even if I were
Yeah.
to meet Temologo today, I've never met her, but like that part of me kicks in when I see a little child and I'm just like, I just want to
You know
love
what
them.
to do.
You know what I mean? But for me, my experience has been men, and I'm looking forward to a series of talks, because I'm keen to hear from men. Like, men feel insecure around fathering and fatherhood, just feeling like I'm not doing it right, or maybe.
Mm.
And also, one thing that came up in our research. I mean, I remember this particular participant when we were
Yeah.
talking about nappy changing. I mean, we're in the heart of bushbuck um, in Bundu, like in the Bundus,
Yes.
and like, what do you mean? I must change my child's nappy. That is inappropriate. I have a girl child. What do you change their
Ooh.
nappy? And also just how hypersexualized we are as a society, man. Because for him, he was literally saying it's inappropriate because she's not of the same age as me, and that could potentially just be weird. It's
Mm.
You know what I mean? So, and also, I think my biggest thing, Karabo, is we are having these conversations, they're great, but there is people, man, on the outskirts. There is ordinary men and women on the outskirts in Bushbuckridge, in the Bundus, who need to have this conversation.
Who's not watching my YouTube live?
What's Instagram? What is it? What does
My
it mean?
phone.
Zhuang. So for me, my biggest thing, I mean, would be to get every single man, like every single woman, every single child, every single girl child, aware and sensitized. And just deeply unlearning. There's so much we need to learn as a society. There's so much we need to unlearn. The things that are no longer serving us, guys, those gender norms that keep perpetuating, men just participating, we need to unlearn that. They're not serving us.
Yeah. We
We
need
need to
a
get
we need a true and national men's and women's conference.
Bona.
It's in your Twitter.
No, we
A
really
real
do.
one. I'm calling for petition. We need a men's and women's.
But to commend you on the work that you're doing. Because for me, it's not the people with the 2 million followers. They'll be great. It's not the people with, the biggest platforms. It's you and I every single day in our sphere of influence doing and reminding and affirming the men around us and reminding them that they have such a critical role to play. It's you at that family function, speaking up
Yes.
at that, you know what I mean, at that workplace.
Crying over the price stand.
Crying, why are you not taking your 10 days? It's when HR, you're in a room, you are in a space of influence, in a workspace. But, so it's people in places of influence in the workplace fighting for that gender neutral parental leave. It's things, guys. It's co-cracking. Can we just not have, body mums and tots situations? Can we just start bringing men into the conversation? Men are not. It's you and I. It's the people that are listening now that are gonna contribute to the change. We are not shamed. We're not waiting for government. Stop waiting for anybody. And yeah,
Who are waiting for?
the people that struggle with the father wound.
Yeah.
Within, seek the services. It's okay. He might never. And where he is there, you are able to reach out, do it. If not, make peace, forgive, release, so you don't get that trauma to the next generation.
I'm not saying anything else. That was a wonderful way. Not even going to. Thank you so much, Pam, for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to engaging with you and Heartlines more and seeing how we can play our part in continuing to drive the conversation and changing perspectives and touching.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Thank you to everyone. Love you. Bye.
Bye.